Hello everybody. So today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. One of the core pieces of advice in many of the videos I produce, especially those about getting certified in various technologies like AWS, is that practical experience is incredibly important. And this applies for just about any skill you can learn. For a lot of people who watch my videos, in particular those who are already working in industry, getting practical experience simply means finding a way to incorporate new skills they've learned into their existing jobs. For example, a software developer learning about cloud technologies might see if they can start taking on some cloud architecture work within their team or within their company. Or a network engineer who wants to learn back-end development, for example, might start by automating network configurations. But what happens if you're a student who has never worked in any role relevant to your chosen industry? You can't take on extra responsibilities in your job if you've never had a relevant job. So that's where internships come in. The idea of an internship is that it's basically just a short-term job designed for someone who doesn't have a whole lot of experience in that role in order to get them that experience. Once the internship's over, if all goes well, the intern will have gained a whole bunch of experience in the relevant role and either continue on at that company or at a new company somewhat later on with the skills that they've learned. In return, the company benefits from relatively cheap labor compared to most of their workforce and also benefits from gaining a potential future employee. On top of that, in most countries around the world, including Australia where I live, the vast majority of intern positions are paid positions. So that means that a student who's likely otherwise going to be working in minimum wage jobs can actually make a bit more money, so they can be quite lucrative. Personally, I've held quite a few different roles at various companies during my time at university, and two of these have been internships. I was lucky enough and applied myself enough that both of these internships turned into more permanent work arrangements. I get a lot of questions about how I did that, and also how I landed these internships in the first place. So in response to that, recently I delivered a talk to a group of first-year engineering students at Monash University in Melbourne, teaching them pretty much everything I know about this subject. I really wanted to share that talk with you all here on this channel, and so Monash has kindly agreed to let me reproduce a recording of the presentation here. I hope you find it useful. If you do, I'd really appreciate if you could give this video a like so that I can reach as many people as possible with this advice. Also, if you have any questions or comments at all, please leave a comment on the video. I try to respond to every single comment that people leave on this channel, and I appreciate all of them. So without any further ado, here's my talk on why you should and how you can participate in internships as an engineering student and how to make the most of them. Let's jump right into it.
Hello everyone, my name is Patrick. Today I'm going to be talking about a bunch of internships I've done. So I'm sort of going to focus on like the mindset of like why you would want to intern, and then also some practical tips for like how you can land internships. So to start, I sort of want to talk about the three ways that in my experience, people I know and myself have like landed internships. So the first one's like through Monash. So Monash has a variety of different programs. For example, so I'm doing software engineering, and this talk's going to be kind of focused on the software engineering side of things. So Monash has a program called IBL, Industry-Based Learning, which anyone who's doing software engineering or an IT-focused degree can be a part of. There's also like work integrated learning, which is a similar idea. There's capstone projects for some courses, like commerce, for example, where you can like do an internship as part of your degree. And there's also for any engineering specialization, I believe, there's a thing called the engineering co-op program. So there's a few different things that Monash has to offer there in the way of like landing internships. The second way is just applying online. So a lot of companies, especially like larger companies, will have like an online application form that you can go through, and then you like interview with them and so on. And then the third way is just probably the least common way, but I have seen it happen to a variety of people, is just like through networking and a bit of luck. Like if you go to a variety of different events, maybe you'll meet someone who has like who works for a company that's looking for someone who has a skill set matching what you've got. And so in my experience, actually, I've had all three of these happen, which I consider myself very lucky to sort of have done that like while I've been at uni. So the first one was in first year. I was at this event. There was a meetup, but it was called Google Developer Group. And I was pretty much just like, anyone come along and just like build Android apps. And I did not know how to build Android apps, but I went along to this meetup, and I just had a chat to a few people and sort of showed an interest in what was being like discussed and so on. And this guy who happened to be like the chief technology officer of this startup was kind of like, hey, you should come along and have a chat and see if you want to like intern with us. So I did that, and I ended up actually working there for a year and a half, which was amazing. So that was a company called Bluedot. And then halfway through last year, I started doing industry-based learning through Monash. So that was with ANZ, which was like my #1 preference as well. So again, really lucky there. But anyone can pretty much do IBL if you're doing software eng or similar. So I'd highly recommend that program. I'll talk about that again when I go to sort of tips. And then the third one is like at the end of this year, I'm going up to Sydney to do a 3-month internship with a tech company called Atlassian. You may have heard of them, maybe not. They're one of the biggest companies in Australia. And I got that through applying online. So yeah, I've had all three of these like strategies work out well for me. And I know other people who've sort of had these work as well. So for Courtney previously, the applying online was what landed her the job with CPB. So yeah, all three of those can definitely work. In terms of, hang on, where are we? Yeah, in terms of like why you would want to do an internship, I mean, to some people, it's probably kind of just like a truism, like, yeah, I want to do an internship because I want to do an internship. But there's like obvious reasons why it's good. But I sort of want to dive a bit deeper into like what I personally have gained out of it. So like the most important thing for me is just building skills and like both hard skills and soft skills. Because especially for software, and I think this is true for engineering in general, similar to sort of how Courtney answered my question before about you learn a lot on the job in terms of practical things, whereas uni focuses more on like the theory. I think for software, it's like especially true. So you'll learn things like how does the computer processor work, how does a database work, and you learn some of these like low-level programming languages. But then you go on to, you know, you start interning at some software company and they want you to build like a web application and you've never done that before. So there's a lot of things that uni doesn't teach you that tend to be pretty useful when you actually get a job. So doing an internship is just a way to do that before you actually graduate. So for me, that's been really helpful. I've sort of got like a bit of a taste of like a whole bunch of different types of software engineering. So, you know, I've done a bit of like mobile app development, a bit of front end web development, a bit of back end web development, and things like that. So you sort of learn what you like and don't like before you actually graduate and get like a full-time job. The other thing is that when you are at uni and you're working on group projects, that's kind of the best approximation of working in a company, but it's still not quite perfect because everyone who's there is still learning. Whereas when you're in a company, you're dealing with people who potentially have decades worth of experience. So for example, when I was at Bluedot, which is the first company I interned at, I was working with this guy who had previously worked for about 5 years as a telecommunications engineer at Google. And that was just amazing, just hearing about his experience and like what it was like working at Google. And I remember he sat me down for about an hour at one point and just taught me how satellites work. And that was like something that was sort of necessary for the project we were working on. And just to hear it from like a complete expert in the field was just amazing. And it's not something that you really get at uni unless you have like a lecturer who has sort of done that, because you're most likely not going to get that from the other students that you're working with. So interning sort of gives you that exposure to like the wider world of people who've like worked on big projects and can teach you about them. Other than that, I just think it's really fun. I enjoy working on a variety of different projects. And when you do an internship, often they will give you like the fun projects to work on, just because companies will try and like, they want to make their interns like the company. So they'll often give you projects that are like sort of self-contained and like in a sort of fun area. So for example, with ANZ, I was working on like building machine learning models to like analyze images, which was really like cutting edge, like cool technology. And it was a really fun project. When you're like working full time, sometimes you'll obviously get to work on things like that, but often it'll just be like maintaining systems and so on. So when you intern, you get to have like a pretty fun time. And on top of that, like a lot of these companies will just do like, you know, you have like company events where you go out for lunches and you go bowling and things like that, and you actually get to know your co-workers. And I find that really fun as well. On top of that, sort of during those social events, you'll often get to know people, and even when you're just working, you'll get to know people who sort of take an interest in you and in like helping you with your career. As an example, again at Bluedot, there was this guy who's like the vice president of product, And this title sounded really fancy, but it was a pretty small company. There was about 30 people. So vice president of product was, like, it's not like it was like Amazon or something, but he thought that what was I gonna say? So he was like a really like easy to get along with, like really nice guy. And he would always just give me pieces of advice like, oh yeah, I worked at this company before, like maybe you'd be interested in like doing this there, or like, hey, let me know if you need any intros to people from like other companies that he'd worked at in the past and things like that. And it's just like having those connections is super powerful and super like it can really accelerate your career. So I've like lent on him for advice like, hey, should I put this on my resume or not? Or what do you think about this for a grad role and things like that? And having those mentors is really, really useful. So yeah, like those are probably the main benefits of interning. There are obviously definitely others as well. But yeah, I hope I've sort of made internship sound pretty appealing, because I think if there's one thing that can make uni a more fun time for people is like getting involved with internships in various capacities. So hopefully that's made convince everyone. So yeah, I've got to get into these things. So here's my tips for like actually landing these internships, because people find it difficult, and it definitely can be difficult, and it can be disheartening as well when you just keep getting rejected. And I've definitely been through it as well. The first tip I'd say is that timing is important. What was like the big cause for me, I think, of just like not hearing back from companies was I was sort of applying at the wrong time. So like last year, I was like trying to apply like late into the year to get an internship at the end of last year. And that's just usually not how it works. If you want to apply for like a big, at least tech companies, they'll be like early in the year you actually need to apply. So they're sort of their internship intakes will be from like February until like maybe June. So like looking at the clock right now, if you guys are penultimate year, and I know most of you are more like early in your degrees, but if you are like penultimate year and you want to intern somewhere, I would like definitely like look into it and make sure that the companies that you want to apply for aren't like about to close. So that's something that's pretty important to think about. The other thing to think about as well is everyone says it's like a numbers game in terms of like, if you apply for one company and you get rejected from that company, you probably should have just applied for more companies, because quite often maybe they don't even look at your resume, or they've got thousands of applicants in like 20 roles to fill. So it is a numbers game to an extent. But I also like to think of it as a fractions game, meaning what fraction of your applications are actually even being looked at and like moving you to the next level. Because if you are applying to about 100 companies and you don't hear back from any of them, or you just get rejected from all of them, more often than not, it's probably a sign that there is something that you can improve about your CV, or something you can improve about the way you're sort of applying and presenting yourself. It could just be a matter of like actually writing cover letters, because I know some people don't do them, or it could be a matter of trying to like rearrange your CV to be like more readable or shorter or something like that. But yeah, if you're like applying to 100 companies and hearing back from none of them, it's probably indicating that there's some improvement you could make. At the same time, don't just apply for a single company. Definitely apply for like at least like 5 to 10 in the area that you're interested in. The third one is that WAM and GPA are important, and they're also not important. So I think there's kind of two camps here in terms of people saying like, WAM is the only thing you need, and then there's people who say like, don't worry about it at all. Just do extracurricular stuff like that. I sort of think that they're both like, it can go both ways, because if you have a really bad WAM, but you have heaps of interesting extracurricular things you can talk about that are relevant to the company, I think most companies are going to be fine with that. At the same time, though, if you have a pretty terrible WAM and nothing else to show for yourself, then they're probably just going to choose somebody else. And if you have a really fantastic WAM and not that much extracurriculars, then even then they might not be interested, because they don't know what you are interested in outside of studying, as Courtney discussed. So yeah, WAM is important, but it's not the most important thing in the world. A little tip I actually picked up from someone as well is, if you, and I know lots of people in this position, if you have like a pretty bad first or second year WAM and then you get like improved throughout your degree, you can just put your final year WAM on your CV when you're applying for things, or your penultimate year WAM, and just specify that it like corresponds to that year. Companies like will know what you're doing. Like they know you're not putting your whole WAM for a reason, but it also like they will understand like this progression of like you've improved. And if they ask you about it in an interview, you just say, oh yeah, I was still getting used to uni in first year, and then I've like kind of improved as I've gone. And who can argue with getting better as you go? Like that like shows initiative and it shows character. So that's something that you can do. Fourth thing, you definitely sort of want to be connected to people and involved with student clubs and extracurriculars and so on. A couple of the ones that I've been involved with is Monash Association of Coding, which is great for anyone doing an IT related degree. And they're very big on sort of applications and helping people with resumes and things like that. So I would definitely get involved with those if you're focused on software. And I'm also on this student team called Deep Neuron. It's actually how I found out about giving this talk, because Eric is on that team as well. And that's just an example of a student team that you could join if you're interested in the kind of the work that they're doing. So there's plenty of those. I'll just look on the Monash website because they've got this whole list of like student clubs and teams, and just go to as many meetings of those as you can, and you'll get to know people and they can help you. And fifth tip, I know everything I've just said is probably inducing a whole lot of stress, and I really don't mean for it to. So please don't stress about this. You're in first year, second year, like don't worry. You've got plenty of time and you don't need to, this is like applying for internships is not the most important thing in the world. It's just something extra you can do that's like enjoyable and helps sort of bolster your CV. And I know plenty of people who never interned anywhere and then have still like landed great grad roles. So it's not that you don't have to do it. It's just a matter of like getting extra experience and sort of having an enjoyable time, like doing some work that's relevant to your degree while you're at uni, which I think is really important, because like actually putting to use the things you use at uni is the things you learn at uni is very different to just learning them. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much everything that I wanted to say. Here's just a few resources that I've mentioned. So the first one is the IBL program, which I mentioned earlier, those two clubs, and then LinkedIn, which very important to have LinkedIn as Courtney has discussed. If anyone wants to reach out to me there and ask me any more questions, I'm more than happy to answer. And now I will happily take some questions if anyone's got them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. That was very interesting and very informative. If anyone has any questions, oh, quite a few. Rachel, you can go ahead.
Sorry, I've just had a blank, so I'll try to remember my question in the meantime. Erica, did you want to go? Did you have a question?
I didn't have a question. I was just clapping, but
oh, there's a clapping. There's a hand up.
I can think of something while you're thinking. I do think everything you said, Patrick, was so amazing. I think, how did you specifically, like, how do you go about finding what really suits you best when you go into an internship or a graduate program? Because I feel like software can be really broad. I'm doing mechatronics, which can be really broad again, and I'm trying to find that niche. So yeah, how do you know when you, like, something clicks with you?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think, yeah, so mechatronics is sort of considered to be a combination of software, mechanical, and electrical, right? So that's like even broader than software, because software is just one of those three. But there's definitely a huge amount of variety in the software industry. Like I said before, you've got front-end roles, you've got back-end roles, you've got this whole variety of different things you can do. And I think the most important thing is just to try a bit of everything. So for me, like I started off doing mobile. Like I said, I found that startup job at like a mobile development meetup. I started doing a bit of Android. And then after I built some Android stuff for them, they said, do you want to try iOS? And I said, sure, like, you know, I'm just here to learn as much as I can. So I tried iOS and I got to sort of compare those two and see which one I liked better. It was iOS, by the way. And then I started doing some web development, so front end and back end. And you basically just try as much as you can and you just keep pushing to like do different projects. So I tried to make it so that like for the first couple of years of doing these internships and sort of these undergraduate roles, I basically tried to never do two projects that were like using the same sort of technology, because that way I would just get the most exposure as possible. Because I think when you're interning, you don't want to necessarily always be working on things that you love doing. You want to also just be trying all these different things so that when you finish your degree and you go to apply for grad roles and so on, you actually know what you're interested in. So for Atlassian, for example, I applied for the back end position because I sort of learned that I prefer working on back end to front end. So that was sort of like something that I've learned from the previous internships, and then you can just build from there. So that's sort of how I handled it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Rachel, did you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. And I thought of an extra question in the meantime. So my first question is, Patrick, what do you think is the balance between like the number of extracurriculars or just other things aside from uni that you do versus the amount of time that you spend on them? So is it better to do lots of different things and just maybe spend a couple of hours on it each week? Or do you think it's better to like just pick a couple or maybe even one and then just do a lot towards that?
Right. Yeah, you're definitely asking someone who's probably almost imbalanced to the point of trying to do a lot of different things. So like right now, for example, I'm doing 2 days a week with ANZ, and then I'm also like part of Deep Neuron and a few other things as well. Like I'm trying to do a couple of courses outside of uni. So yeah, there's definitely you can take it too far, and I think at times I go, why do I do this to myself? So I would advise to most people, if you just want to like enjoy your time at uni, maybe don't do too much stuff. But I always just can't help myself. I'm just too interested in like too many things. But I also know other people who've gone the exact opposite route and gone, I want to get really, 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 really good at one thing. And that can pay off as well, because by the time you finish uni, you're practically an expert, which sounds funny because you haven't even graduated yet. But like if you focus it entirely, you focus all your time on like learning how to get really good at, say, machine learning, for example, you'll be really, really good at it by the time you graduate. And then you can, if that's what you're most interested in, you can go into a role where you're already like super experienced. So there's a balance to be had because there's only so many hours in a week. And if you're trying to do a lot of things at once, then you just don't have time to go really deep with them. So it's up to you, I suppose, is the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I have the same tendency as you to try and do everything because a lot of things are really interesting. But yeah, I just don't find that I end up spending as much time on them as I might like. So that's why I asked. The other question I had was, do you have any advice for like really shining at an internship and making a great impression while you're there?
So I'd say probably the most important thing is to be really proactive. So for example, if you come across a technology, again, I'm speaking from a software perspective, I'm not sure what your specialization is, but basically if you come across a technology you haven't used before, well, one way you can really impress your managers is to go and basically try and learn that technology beyond what is sort of needed for the internship. So for example, with ANZ, my team was just like extensively using this cloud platform called AWS. And I sort of took it on myself to become like the person in the team who people could like go to like ask questions about like deploying software and so on. And so I was going through these courses on YouTube and on Udemy and things like that for like learning how to do that. So that's like one way that you can really try and show that you're like active and like trying to learn as much as you can. And then just another way is just like taking on extra responsibilities, I suppose. So if someone says like outside of your core work, hey, can somebody help me with this? You like go and help them as much as you can, devote a few hours to it, go and learn some extra stuff if you need. At the very least, you're just going to learn that thing, and at the best, you're going to learn that thing, help them with it, and impress whoever it is that's like needs to be impressed. So yeah, that's been my main like strategy, I suppose.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. And thank you, Patrick, for those really awesome answers. I actually have one final question before like we can just chill here until basically 2. I feel like I struggle heaps with confidence, and like I do think I do understand concepts and stuff, and I know what to do, but I don't have the confidence to like step into a project and be like, okay, guys, let's do this, let's do that. Because I'm scared like I'll get it wrong and be embarrassed. So how do you feel about like tackling that? This is like a therapy session as well.
No, that's all right. That's a common thing. I had a huge imposter syndrome for the first I'd say at least 6 months, but then every time I jump into like a new technology I haven't used, I get it for like at least a few weeks of just like, I don't know what I'm doing and I don't feel like I'm qualified to help other people with it. But you kind of just push past it. And I think eventually you get to the point where you realize just based off the responses you have to problems, like if you can solve them and then other people who maybe they've been working with that technology for even longer, they go, oh, I don't know how I would do this. You just go, hang on, I saw this in a course or something like that. You sort of realize, hang on a minute, I actually do have something to contribute here. So I think that's probably been like the main saving grace for me. But I think at the same time, one thing that I always like to do is like just document and write as much as I can and like draw out diagrams. So that if I'm unsure about the approaches, like let's say I've got 3 different ideas about how we might solve some problem that's often they're quite ambiguous problems that doesn't have like a well-defined solution. I'll like write up a document, like here's how I think we could do it, but we could do it this way and it might be cheaper, but then it might fall apart in a month from now, or, you know, there's all these different ways we could do it. And then I'll just get everyone else to comment and we sort of decide as a team, like what's the best way to do it. And that's sort of just another way, I suppose, to show your managers that you're like thinking about all the different ways that you could architect things, and it also sort of shows initiative of like willing to take those notes and like organize those meetings and so on. So I think that's like probably the main way is like, if I'm not completely sure about something, you just ask someone, but you make it sure it's documented, you make sure it's like formalized so that if something goes wrong, you can go, well, look, here's what we all decided on, rather than it just being like, here's what I just did on a whim and then it just fell apart. So yeah, that's probably like the main way.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's a feedback kind of system where you do something and then you kind of see that it does work and you're like, okay, I can do this. I'm not an imposter anymore. That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Does anyone have any more final questions? Do you have questions? We can just do it. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Patrick, for coming on. That's like so awesome. And I know everyone's gotten so much out of this.
So that's it for the presentation, but I've got plenty more to say on this subject. So if you like that one, check out one of these videos and I'll see you next time. Have a great day.